expectations that we actually see a meaty infrastructure bill passed by Congress this year, and perhaps even more importantly, that we see a bill that does make room, create the opportunity for some of these new next-generation mobilities technologies, such as yours, to become reality.
Yeah, it's tremendously exciting to see that, because when we look at the future that's in front of us, we see the opportunity to do it differently. And the one thing that we always know here in the U.S. and around the world is that every time you've been able to connect people faster, we've moved forward as a country, as a civilization, if you will. And so Hyperloop is really kind of taking it to that next level, which is saying if we do want to create this new form of connectivity, we want to do that for this century, in this millennium, not the last century. Hyperloop's that form. So you're going the speed of an aircraft for a fraction of the energy consumption. You know, you can have instead of a 30-lane highway, you could have something that's basically a 2-lane tube. And you could do all of that in a much, much smaller piece. And that's the real excitement here, is that when we look at connecting this country for this century, Hyperloop could be that place.
Where would you be looking to build out Hyperloop? What would the cost be? And I realize that changes from location to location. And what would the price for passengers be?
Great question. So we've been able to look at a number of places around the U.S., a number of different studies to see where the most, I'll say, the best places for us to start would be. And one of the areas that I think kind of galvanizes and shows this whole thing is this idea of St. Louis to Kansas City. So right now that takes about 3.5 hours in a car. On a Hyperloop, it's about 30 minutes. And you can consider going, to Kansas City for a baseball game and then coming back in the same night. Roughly, that would be like a couple of tanks of gas if you're doing that drive. For Hyperloop, it's about $30. So maybe half the tank, or half the cost of a tank of gas. And that would give you a huge amount of incentive, a huge amount of reason to do that. But we see opportunities really in a number of parts: Texas, the Midwest, West Virginia. You look at New York to Washington, D.C. You look at Washington State. You see these areas that are trying to be connected. And when you look at actually building out kind of a national scale infrastructure, you got to start with some of these smaller demonstration projects. And the sooner we get people on those, the sooner that we'll be able to start connecting these cities that are a bit further apart, all at a fraction of the cost of what high-speed rail is, about 30% less.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds really exciting. I'm just curious, can your company coexist with, and I know you used to work at SpaceX, so you probably have some insights on this, but can your company coexist with Boring Company and that Hyperloop project that is being tested and rolled out in certain markets versus some of the other projects and private railroads that we're seeing built as well?
Yeah, I think there's a need for a huge new form of mobility, kind of a revolution for all, not just single modes here and there. And so when you look at the Boring Company, you see kind of that electric vehicle inside of a tunnel. And that's something that could be that kind of last mile solution. We're looking at doing higher speeds, longer distances, larger capacities. And that's where you have the ability to connect to those last mile solutions, whether they're electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, they're Boring Company vehicles, they're autonomous vehicles driving on the road. Like, that mobility system of the future is going to be powered by a high-speed backbone that connects all of these different parts of the world.
Josh, I could look at your videos all day long, and we're watching the one where the actual those two people actually did that test run. But when you talk about the future, what are we talking about realistically? Even if there were to be funding and the right of ways and everything, when do you actually see some of these things starting to really be used by people getting on them?
Well, that's a good one, because the test that you're watching right now is our Kitty Hawk moment, if you will. So I actually was the first passenger in a Hyperloop. So it was exciting to be inside of it. And my goal, what I'm calling this decade, so the 2020 is going to be the decade of Hyperloop. So it started with myself and 3 of my colleagues riding in a Hyperloop. And it's going to end with me putting everybody onto a Hyperloop on a number of different continents and a number of different places in the world. So the goal here is to go from those two, from that moonshot. You talked about NASA earlier, trying to put people back to the moon. We're doing a moonshot here on Earth. We're trying to take the 2 or 3 people that have ridden Hyperloop so far and make sure that everybody gets to have that opportunity, that ride of a lifetime, to just transform the way that we live, we work.
So, Josh, I mean, we're seeing a lot of these new technologies come to market via SPAC right now, whether it is the eVTOLs, whether it is a company like Virgin Galactic, which has long-term aspirations to do hypersonic point-to-point rocket travel around the Earth. Would you go public? Are you considering it?
We're definitely keeping all of the financing options on the table. I mean, it's an interesting market, that's for sure.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.